is the 15th of June 2021 meeting of the Standing Committee on Local Government to ascertain the presence of a quorum. Could we ask the members to present themselves quickly for roll call purposes?
Good morning. My name is Matlodi Maseko, and I'm a member of the Standing Committee.
Good morning, Chair. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Alternate member of this committee.
Good morning. Good morning, members. Any other members? I received an apology from member Nkamba Boita. Any other apologies, Johan, that you received that I may not be aware of?
No, Chairperson, no other apologies.
Thank you. Then I would like to welcome the HOD of the department, Mr. Paulser, and the Chief Director of Municipal Performance Monitoring and Support, Ms. Ida Barnard. Colleagues, as you are aware, this meeting is conducted place virtually by MS Teams. We are by now all familiar with the rules of engagement as far as the virtual meetings are concerned. Safe to say, may I remind you that all members are muted at the start of the meeting. Guests to the meeting are not allowed to participate to meeting item agenda other than those who are requested to do so by the chairperson. We have technical assistance on board for members who may experience technical difficulties. I would request members to disable their videos for ease of conducting the business of the meeting. The participants who may present at the meeting, and if you do want to make a contribution to the meeting, you may enable your video link. Other than that, I would request and ask members to disable that functionality at that point. Furthermore, I'd like to just bring it to the attention of the members and those who are on the platform of the directives for meetings of committees. It was 80 seats on the 17th of April 2020, and I shall not repeat what that directive is. And then lastly, unfortunately, due to the limitations that we do not have translation services at our disposal for this meeting, and I would ask members to conduct the communication in English, and if need be, should there will be a pressing need for an alternate language to be spoken, we will then make arrangements that such translations would take place. As you all know, that this meeting has been called to, amongst other things, to receive a briefing from the department in relation to the Sustainable Infrastructure Development and Finance Facility Program and the purpose of this program, and then thereafter we will consider minutes and reports and the program of the committee, and we will then adopt any resolutions that may flow from this meeting. So, colleagues, that's the long and short of my introduction. I am going to mute disable my video link because, things are a bit unstable where I am here in the rural areas. So I hand over to Mr. Paulser, who's the HOD, and then he will introduce his officials and direct the presentation from this point onwards. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Paulser. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you this morning on the infrastructure initiatives that the department has undertaken. Obviously, initially we indicated that this is relevant to certain municipalities. There is an initiative now to make this broader and make it applicable to the entire province. So Marius, together with Ida, they've done extensive work around this. And the arrangement is that Marius Brandt, who is the Director for Infrastructure, will take us through the presentation this morning. So I will ask Marius, Chairperson, with your acquiescence that he just proceeds with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paulser. It's all in order, so we can proceed.
Chairperson, I just want to check with the Marius. I don't see Marius on the platform. Ida, do you know where Marius is?
Actually, no, I'm here in Ida's office.
Okay.
Will the committee be loading the presentation?
Leon, are you able to do it?
Chairperson, I'll do so. Just give me 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Sure, thank
Is it visible, Chairperson?
Yes, it is, but if you could, yeah, it is. You can proceed. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity for us to present to you the work that we've been doing as local government in the field of a new approach to infrastructure development and financing. We refer to it as the SIDIF program, standing for Sustainable Infrastructure Development and Financing Facility. If we can go to the next slide. What is the practice that has been shown looking at the development of new infrastructure and the development? The following observations were made. We could see that there is an increase in trend of the gap between the rate at which urbanization is taking place, especially in our secondary cities, based on the number of job opportunities available in these areas and therefore movement of people to our secondary cities. And therefore we identified these secondary cities as those where we need to look at how we can assist them with the infrastructure development. We have also observed that in terms of pipeline planning of infrastructure, especially in terms of the link between maybe the provincial spatial development framework as well as coming down to local level at municipal spatial development frameworks and the economic development strategy of the province, long-term financial planning. We've got to look at it in a new way, and there is specific skills required in municipalities to develop these pipelines. Then, in terms of the national government's fiscal policy, we have seen that in terms of the whole grant and financial modeling, the smaller municipalities basically only have most of their budget allocated to operations and maintenance, and very little left over for capital budget infrastructure development, and therefore the need to look at new financing streams for this infrastructure development in these municipalities. If we can move to the next slide. So in terms of the new approach that is required now, we've got to have a whole new holistic approach in terms of how we look at infrastructure. The debate changed in terms of service delivery. Service delivery is no longer just the access to infrastructure, but it is also about the quality of those services that's provided. And it looks at how we can have planning working together with the infrastructure that's required to enable economic growth and development, and therefore looking at international best practice in this specific field. We saw that we need now a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral and multi-skilled team of experts to collaborate with our municipalities to develop these project pipelines referred to in the earlier slide. The new approach comprises of a literature review that was conducted, which looked at relevant national and provincial strategies, policies, as well as international best practice. We look at to identify developmental patterns, economic drivers, and socio-economic realities, to provide a holistic view of the areas and its development in infrastructure financing needs. The documents that one could maybe cite here that we looked at was the Provincial Growth and Development Strategy, the Provincial Economic Review and Outlook, the PERO, the MEDO, as well as the provincial and local spatial development plans, and the municipal integrated development plans, the IDPs. Chair, if we can move to the next slide. Chair,
Johan, can you move over to the next slide, please? Johan?
Chair, is he visible?
Yeah, can you proceed to the next slide, please?
Okay, Chair, let me just quickly see if I can get him back. I don't know what happened to him now. Is it visible now, Chair?
It is visible, but we're still on the old slide.
There we go, Chair.
yes, thanks, Chair. So in addition, we also look at the bulk infrastructure plans within these municipalities, as long as the long-term financial planning. The selection of the qualifying secondary cities partake in the project and secure support. Criteria included strong governance and clean audit track record. That was some of the criteria we used in identifying these secondary cities, and obviously the secondary cities where we experience the big need for infrastructure development to narrow that gap between the needs for infrastructure and the rate at which urbanization is taking place. We've identified catalytic projects in these areas that will unlock economic development as well as social development. south of the new Paul Mall. That immediately opened up a whole new economic development corridor, which attract a significant amount of new investment in residential, business, and industrial development. Immediately, it also changed the landscape around that and assisted with social development or socio-economic upliftment in the adjacent areas. We explored possible innovative funding mechanisms. We looked at packaging these qualifying projects and take them from feasibility to bankability. And we also looked at how we will look at proposal of development and changing the supply chain proposals in line with the MFMA and other regulatory frameworks. If we can move to the next slide. So the program has been divided into two phases. The phase one looked at consolidation of all the infrastructure projects in these qualifying municipalities. And then we had to look at how we screen these projects to see which ones of those would have the biggest catalytic impact in the municipality and the region and ultimately in the province. Using the long-term financial strategy and DFI criteria. So in order for us to open the market for international donor agencies to fund into capital investment in South Africa, you've got to comply with those DFI development funding institutions criteria. We then looked at coordinating and providing the platform for taking these projects from feasibility to bankability. During phase two, we will be looking at the long-term financial model in order to evaluate and see what the impact of these projects would be on the funding streams of municipalities, and therefrom would flow the funding strategies are the most appropriate for that specific infrastructure identified. We will then look at infrastructure financing advisory services in terms of best borrowing options and practices in terms of the Municipal Finance Management Act. We will look at providing the overall oversight and support in the rollout of the program and the projects to ensure governance that is crucial for international investors to invest in South Africa. If we can move to the next slide. So we secured a partner and we went for an international partner. Why for an international partner? Obviously bringing in international best practice into the province. Also giving us access to more international development partners. Therewith also went the availability of grant funding that will be required to secure and appoint specialist team, planners, engineers, economists, development financiers, etc. Why did we choose the French government? Specifically the AFD, standing for the French Development Agency. They lead in supporting and accelerating the transition to a fairer and more sustainable world in support of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They lead in that area, and in terms of the partners that they link to in the rest of the world. We then formalized this partnership by signing a memorandum of agreement between South Africa and the French government, as shown in the photos on the slide. And this symbolizes the start of a new area and partnership with the French and the other doors that will be opened through this program. If we can move to the next slide. The role of the Department of Local Government is particular to give that provincial-wide oversight and governance. We also identify and facilitate municipal buy-in and participation, creating an enabling environment for effective planning and the enhanced rollout of these catalytic and impactful infrastructure projects. It is a gateway. We as local government is then the gateway for communication and interaction between the municipalities and the affected national and provincial departments. With the HOD made contact with all the other relevant HODs in the provincial government within the field of infrastructure development. We succeeded in having a big support for this program and thus working with them in the rollout of the program. If we can then move to the next slide. So where are we standing currently with this program on phase 1? The AFD appointed a service provider, Green Cape. So they went through their own procurement program. They've advertised, and Green Cape was the successful service provider appointed by the French Development Agency. We then established a project steering committee, and this steering committee is bringing together all the infrastructure related departments within Western Cape government. We had roadshows to the 8 beneficiary municipalities, where we then had from municipal managers indicated an overwhelming commitment to the program. All of these municipalities saw the new way in which we have to look going forward in investment in infrastructure. We then established an infrastructure liaison committee, and that is bringing the administrative leadership and senior managers of the respective managers in a committee working with the various respective departments in the infrastructure field. The catalytic impact projects have now been identified and confirmed with these municipalities, and they agreed for us to proceed with this to the next phase. If we can go to the next slide. The scope within phase 1 looked at particularly the identification of the projects. Then we had to consolidate the pipeline of projects. We had to look at how do we identify from these the most catalytic programs. And then in the last phase where we now is where we've got an enabling environment to take these projects from feasibility to bankability. If we can move to the next slide. This is an example of typically the catalytic projects identified and agreed with the municipalities to take further in phase 2. As one can see, we've identified an amount of 1.299 billion rand of projects that complies with the international criteria for funding. So these projects here will all be ticking the box in terms of what that specific development donor funding institutions criteria would be in terms of the National Sustainable Development Goals. As one would see, there's a big focus on water-related projects. This is specifically in terms of climate change that we're facing and the reality of the recent drought and day zero that we've had to deal with in the last couple of years since 2019. So there's also a big emphasis on looking into renewable energy, and understandably as well when looking at the current situation in terms of availability of electricity from Eskom. Um, if we can move to, and maybe another example was smart metering. So it's not also always just in the investment in infrastructure, but also in the management of that infrastructure. Um, in terms of the preferences of the international market, um, the research and package of these projects to concept and pre-feasibility stage before considering potential international funding interest was done. And what we found was there was a strong interest showed into, like I've indicated, water and sanitation and renewable energy projects for the reasons I gave before. There was also a strong preference for funding at a larger scale package projects and programs for regional impact, and as far as going to say at a provincial impact level. And therefore, total shift from the way that we initially looked at investment infrastructure on a municipal by municipal basis, but rather looking at those catalytic projects that can really drive economic development and socio-economic upliftment within the province as a whole. So in consultation with the participating technical directors, there was this full support in this total paradigm shift going forward in looking in development in our province. If we can look at and go to the next slide. Therefore, in terms of the scope of work for phase 2, looking at the feedback that we've received from the development donor institutions, we had to move and shift, had a total new look at how we packaged the phase 2 of this program. Like I indicated before, it looked at a municipal level, but now we're looking at a provincial-wide focus based on provincial growth, potential opportunities, shifting the focus from secondary cities to a provincial-wide approach. We're looking at large-scale package projects or programs for maximum impact. We will be looking at requiring recipient participating municipalities to collaborate. MOAs will be prepared between the relevant stakeholders in order to facilitate the rollout of the initial grant funding that will be received to take project from feasibility to bankability, and then initially or then further the processes to be followed for the investment in the capital and financing of that infrastructure in the capital budget of municipalities. We are working closely with our legal services department to ensure legal services are addressed and to ensure that we minimize potential risks in the legal environment. Thank you. That is then the end of our presentation. Chairperson.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you, Albert, I think. Right, colleagues, yeah, it's a presentation of the department. Just from a cursory perspective, it sounds very exciting, the approach, and we know that infrastructure development is very critical to our municipalities, and very often particularly in our smaller municipalities, there is simply just not enough funding to finance critical infrastructure for development. But more than that, now I'm not going to make any further comments. I'm going to open the floor to members for any questions that they'd like to pose to the department with regard to this presentation, and then allow me the opportunity also to welcome Honourable Nkondlu, who joined our meeting, and you are most welcome to participate in the discussion. I recognize Honourable van der Westhuizen and Honourable Seku, and I'm sure there will be others that will ask questions as well. Honourable van der Westhuizen, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning to the officials. Thank you very much. This is, as you've stated, Chair, quite exciting, and I really appreciate this initiative. I think it can bring a great relief. Just a few comments first before I get over to my questions. The first one is, I think the province has done a study a number of years ago as to the growth potential of certain of our, what they now call secondary towns, or towns aspiring to become cities. And it seems to me as if some of this work is based on that analysis. Perhaps it could just be confirmed. The second one is just in terms of this funding, if we could get an indication of the terms of this funding. Are these loans or are these just donations? And the third one, I appreciate the emphasis on renewable energy projects, but one of the great initiatives to my mind is where municipalities are assisted to become more energy wise. And I fear that some municipalities have got the funds to invest in, for example, LED street lighting, which saves a lot in terms of the energy consumption. But some of our municipalities, I fear, may not be able to roll out this project as widely as one would like to see. And this then creates a kind of spiral. These municipalities don't have enough funding. And now, because they don't have enough funding, they're not able to invest in projects that would save them money going forward. So can I just ask, to what extent can some of these projects also be focused on assisting municipalities not only to generate electricity, but also to save electricity? And then lastly, Chair, it's all very well to assist municipalities with the expansion of the infrastructure, the upgrading of wastewater works, etc. But a problem that I've seen with a number of municipalities is that, unfortunately, they are not even able to maintain the infrastructure, and that they are building up backlogs in maintaining that. And while that can't be an argument not to invest in new infrastructure, it is a matter of concern, and I'm just wondering what role the ongoing maintenance costs of the new infrastructure is playing in terms of the financial analysis of these projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Seku, I recognize you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I think Member Andrikas also touched on some of the questions, but I just want to find out, and I mean, this initiative is very much welcome, and it will be great for those towns and those catalytic projects that have been identified. But the question comes into mind that when you have the towns, and Western Cape, every town, irrespective whether there's catalytic projects or not, it's growing. And I'm going to make an example about Citrusdal. Citrusdal, it's a small town, but the development of housing, the informal settlement has grown so huge that the system that is there already cannot cope with the demand. Now, I want to find out, I was looking at the presentation and saying that to what an extent does the Department of Human Settlements get involved? Because I am looking at all the towns that have been identified also. I don't see like your Grabo that is growing so big that eventually the system that they have, the infrastructure that they have, especially the sewage, won't cope with the demand that is there. Now, if we have to say it's first the identified towns, is those towns in dire need of that to happen now versus all those towns that have been identified because there's no any catalytic projects in those towns? Or what is those towns being identified for now? It's I just want to find out the driver to this. Is that the catalytic projects are there, or there is another reason when you do the vetting to choose the towns that you are going to start looking into them? And in the meantime, whilst the funding and the everything has to happen, what is the short-term plan for those towns that are in dire need for now? And I know that the question, it will be answered by the budget and also the dependency on the grant from national. That it's a fact, and I will never shy away from it. But now we have to say, how are we going to go about to make sure that you don't get into the town like Citrusdal and it smells sewage the whole town because of now the system that are there cannot cope with the demand that is within town. And that has been happening, I think, for more than 8 years, if not 10. Now it comes to another question of that as it happened, the department, there was a grant that was allocated to the municipality and extra money was given from human settlement to the municipality. But the monitoring of implementation for that system hasn't happened in a way that it should be, that by now the difference should be there, but it's not a lot of difference. Yes, the infrastructure, they're busy with doing that, but it's not happening at the pace that it should be happening. Now, as we say we are implementing 1, 2, 3, 4, how are we going to hold the municipalities accountable to really make sure that they react to the needs that the communities out there, they have to get those services from them? And the support, if we can get the indication of the support from the province, that when you are going to do the support, you are going to do an oversight. What does it mean? Because most of the times as we do the oversight from our side as the members of parliament, you'll find that you will get the words being thrown that, no, you are not doing oversight on me, you are in the province as a municipality. Then you ask yourself that now, what does it entail for the department itself when they say they're going to do the oversight to the municipality? What is it? What does it entail? How are you going to give them the support and also do an oversight to make sure that happens? And the responses to that. If there's anything else, I will, if given opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Honorable Moran.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chair, my connection is a bit bad. As you know, I'm staying in a rural area and it looks like it's rain. Normally in these days, reception is bad. Thanks. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, Chair, the presenter was saying basically that this particular program focused on your smaller municipalities. Municipalities, you only got a budget for maintenance and operations, but not to develop infrastructure. But if I look at the municipalities, it seems it's more like the bigger municipalities who have more like in finance to deal with those particular issues. You don't see, for instance, smaller municipalities like a Beaufort, a Canaland, a Metlakama, a Cederberg, or a Prince Albert. And I'm not sure whether there is a specific reason. I'm also not sure what was the criteria for those municipalities to qualify. And if, for instance, look at the municipalities that I've mentioned, Beaufort, Kannaland, Matikama, Cederberg, and Prince Albert, as I've said, I'm not sure whether there's a specific reason, but if you look basically who controls that municipalities, then it's a bit disturbing that none of them are included. But also, Chair, so I like to understand, Chair, why? Because it says smaller municipalities, but if you look at the 8 municipalities, it's the bigger ones. And what the criteria was. Also, Chair, it was also said in the presentation that the success of these projects also rely on the availability of electricity and the specific focus on Eskom and whether they can deliver. Not so long ago, we have received a report of municipalities, a number of municipalities, especially in the Western Cape, that are ready to go off the grid of Eskom, and Breda Valley, for instance, was one of those. Stellenbosch was one of those. So I really want to check whether they are ready to go off the grid, not relying on Eskom, or are they not ready? And the report that we received not so long ago was half truth, Chair. Then, Chair, just a last one. If we say, for instance, these are the 8 municipalities and there will be certain areas that has been identified, does it include your areas on the outskirts of the municipalities? For instance, in Worcester, there's your avian park. Yeah, you have seen houses built over the last 10 to 15 years, but the roads are still gravel. When we speak about infrastructure, does it speak to those areas where there was non-development in terms of roads and so forth, whether it includes that? Chair, and just one correction. It was said 1.229 billion, but if I look at page 10, it says million. I'm not sure whether I have it correct. As I've said, that connection is bad on my side. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Moran, for the observation. Honourable Nkondlo, I recognize you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you. Proceed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning to the presenters, and thank you for the presentation. I think 2 of my questions have been covered by the other members about the criteria. I just want to check, because I heard that this project has been done in partnership with France. Now, I'm interested to know the extent of the engagement with both. I know we do have an IR office, I think in the Premier, if I'm not mistaken, but also in terms of our DERCO, the international relations, what is the extent of their participation or just involvement in this project? Because one would be interested, what would be a dispute mechanism if for any reason one of the parties between ourselves and France as a country that is also participating through the FDA, if I'm not mistaken, I heard properly, what would be a dispute mechanism measure that is provided for in this, given that this is part of a sort of a foreign relation type of an initiative. That's that. Then the second one, I think, Chair, I think the background that was given also touched into the Pero and the Mero, and I'm very happy every time. I think in particular the Mero, I appreciate when colleagues, when they're deciding on programming, they utilize that very critical data that I think is produced by the province, you know, to inform the type of responses. I just wanted to raise that, but then to say in relation to this particular project and the the municipalities that have been identified. I think I would also be interested on the criteria and the extent to which we are responding indeed to the Mero in as far as infrastructure, municipal infrastructure related initiatives are concerned. And lastly, is physical or what we term economic infrastructure not part of the scope of this? And I'm raising this because some of these small municipalities, you know, sometimes we rush for social infrastructure, but we do not consider as part of their local economies, you know, to provide the type of economic infrastructure that is required so that you enable small businesses, traders in those communities to have sort of areas from which they could be able to trade and therefore be able also to contribute in their own economic empowerment. So I might have missed the scope. That is why I'm just throwing in the issue of economic infrastructure. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Kondlu. And I think there's quite a number of questions raised by the members. I'm just going to add one last one, and Mr. Paulson, you can respond. I'd like to know is that in terms of there's an emphasis on the reliance of donor funding, and I think that the catalytic projects that were identified were largely in the bigger secondary city municipalities, as you have sort of outlined at the beginning of the presentation. Now, as Honourable Moran has indicated and Honourable Maseko, is that there are a number of large, smaller municipalities that requires some serious sort of infrastructure development as well. And sort of Honourable Maseko particularly referred to Citrusdal. But my question is that if donor funding is not forthcoming, and one could understand is that the other financing options would be loans in particular. And if one look at the smaller municipalities, and if one should proceed with an option of loan funding, that they do not have the revenue base to service those loans or even to repay those loans. And then lastly, a point raised by Honourable Van der Veshuizen is that the maintenance of infrastructure projects, and often those municipalities that identified in the presentation may have the skills to provide ongoing maintenance, whereas the smaller municipalities, as we know, that the skill sets aren't there. So to what extent in our desire to beef up infrastructure development in the province, are we able to provide sort of the platform whereby the skills that's needed for the maintenance of this infrastructure development are enhanced and also sort of developed. For that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Paulson, and then I know it's a lot of questions asked by the members, and I'm sure that your team and yourself will adequately respond to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, Honourable Chairperson and members. Thank you for the questions. So I'm going to ask both Ira and Marius to respond, and those that I don't respond to, I will then cover just on the broader approach in relation to infrastructure development and how we have oversight and support municipalities in general. Thanks, Chairperson. Marius, if you can proceed, please. Thank you.
Thank you, HG. Thank you, Chair. Let's look at the first question where we will ask about whether we are considering looking at the growth and potential study. That is, yes, 100% the case. It is part of one of the studies and reports that has informed us in terms of selection. as well as looking eventually at the bigger provincial scope in the development and growing the economy of the province. So that was indeed looked at. If we are looking at the donor funding request or question, there's two sides on this side. We've got the grant funding that is coming from the French to appoint the service provider that's currently developing this program and responsible for the rollout of the program. So that is the one side of it, the grant funding to actually develop the program and the new mechanisms, new innovation in terms of financing of infrastructure. But then there's also the part where the funding will be coming from other donor financing institutions, which have showed and will show interest in projects that is in terms of and comply with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And there we're looking at a blended financing model where municipalities will be able to not only look at the previous sort of commercial bank kind of loan type of funding, but a combination of the concessional funding to enable a blended finance approach to municipal infrastructure investment. In terms of the question around Eskom, yeah, the Eskom was not like we are saying we are working as Eskom will, okay, let me rather rephrase that. We are working with our partners in the Department of Economic Development, where they've got a program called Municipal Energy Resilience. So we are collaborating with them, and a big component of these projects, there's some of them already identified, but quite a number of the new ones will also be taken through in phase 2, where we would package them in order for them to be ready to put in and out there in the international market, making the province, as you indicated, more independent from Eskom. I can also want to link this one to the question around going off the grid. As part of this municipal energy resilience program, there's also a product offered in terms of assisting the municipality in the structuring of the electricity tariffs. They refer to it as the feed-in tariff. So the feed-in tariff is the amount that the municipality will actually be giving back to the resident for feeding additional energy that they've generated into the grid. So the whole idea is for the community, the citizens, and the municipalities to combine forces to build resilience in the environment. So we are not foreseeing that municipal or residents will be going off the grid, because they will always see the benefit on staying in the grid in peak hours. There's also always a deficit in availability of funds of energy in the peak hours. And obviously in those days where we don't have wind or we don't have sufficient sun, in alternative energy, where we will still be reliant on Eskom power. The question around maintenance, yes, that is a major and a big concern to us, and therefore providing a lot of assistance to municipalities in terms of operation and maintenance plans that will then guide them in terms of how they prioritize their budgets. In terms of this specific program, we are specifically looking at long-term financial impact on the municipality that is not just looking at the current capital cost investment. It's also looking at what they refer to the total cost of ownership. So it is the total life cycle costing of that infrastructure that includes not only the capital investment, but it also includes the full spectrum of operation and maintenance costs over the lifespan of that specific infrastructure. So maintenance a priority and indeed included in this program. The second question around the focus on secondary cities, and maybe also referring to why we are not maybe looking at the smaller municipalities. For this specific program in phase 1, we are testing the waters, and the secondary cities are at this point in time the area we've got the biggest gap that we've got to fill in terms of financing of infrastructure for new economic development and socio-economic growth. In the smaller municipalities as well, even these municipalities that was referred to, all of them, yes, you've indicated that they are stronger municipalities in terms of finances, but one must remember that these finances and loans are currently used mainly, if not 100%, to eradicate the backlog that was required to assist the rollout of the human settlements programs. And there also then the link between this project and human settlements program to ensure that there is a balance between investment. The example that was mentioned, for example, in Breda Valley with the massive catalytic trans-hex program, that is most definitely on our radar. For the streets are falling under other streams of programs. So if you want to upgrade from a gravel street to a tarred or paved street, that will be going through other streams of funding. The CITIF program is specifically around catalytic projects, those projects that's going to turn around the municipality, that's going to grow those secondary cities. And in doing that, we will also be growing the economy of the whole province and eventually, obviously, benefiting all the other smaller towns that you were referring to. We also just want to allude to the fact that there is no way that we are disregarding these smaller municipalities. They are involved in various other programs we are rolling out. The example made for instance, in the Central Karoo, we've got extensive programs there assisting the municipalities with investment in drought-related projects to ensure water resilience in those areas. Then we are also um, coordinating all these various grants that's available, for instance, your MIC, your RBIC, your WSIC, to ensure that there's no duplication and that we are maximizing or optimizing the use of these resources to maximize impact. So in phases going forward, we would most definitely also start looking at the smaller cities. But like I indicate at the moment, they do have their own funding streams from other programs. In terms of, let me see, there was a question, the last question maybe before we go to international relations. In terms of the support to municipality of capacity, the program here in the secondary cities of CITIF is specifically to bring in that new skills base that we require for municipalities to look at a total new way in which we invest in infrastructure, and how do we enable an environment with mechanisms to do this for us. In the smaller municipalities, we've got as department various programs. We've got, for instance, the JDMA, And there, if I can maybe link that to the example that was used of the Citrus Dal wastewater treatment plant, where this project will then be prioritized, and where we as local government will look and broker funding from other sources, such as RBIC, and like you've indicated, human settlements also came on board to assist with that project. In terms of capacity building and support in the other smaller towns, we've got the programs of shared services that is rolled out and showing to be of huge success. And then we also have a pool of experts that will be deployed later in the new financial year to assist with very specific skills gaps in those municipalities. So yes, the skills assistance and support in the smaller municipalities are not forgotten. We are really focusing on that. Then I see we've got on the panel or in the room our colleague from International Relations. So, Chair, if maybe with your acquisition, we ask you to allow the person from International Relations to provide the answer on that question.
Thank you, Marius. I like the word acquiescence, and it's just ably used by the HOD, and it's very beautiful. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson and members of the panel. I would just like to quickly respond to a question that was put forward about our interaction. So we do work quite closely with the other departments within the Western Cape government when it comes to these kind of agreements. And that is exactly the reason why I'm actually in this meeting this morning. The department actually asked me just to assist them and sit in this meeting. Normally when we have these kind of agreements that deals with development assistance, our processes is quite clearly defined. We do engage quite extensively with the Department of International Relations. We also engage quite extensively with our National Department of Treasury with regards to all these ODA processes. So that process is quite well developed, and we continue to strengthen those relations. With regards to, in response to the question about dispute resolution, the agreement is actually quite explicit in making provision for dispute resolutions, as is standard in terms of these kind of twinning arrangements. So it's suffice to say that we do work quite a lot when it comes to official development assistance with our counterparts at the National Department of International Relations, with National Treasury, that actually vet these agreements for us. And going forward, I think it's going to become quite increasingly important for the province to actually explore quite vigorously agreements of this nature, especially when it comes to additional funding for some of our catalytic projects. And therefore, we look forward to actually work a lot more closely with our departments in possibly developing an international and official development assistance strategy for the province that can actually govern and manage the funding for these catalytic projects coming into the province. I hope I've answered the question sufficiently. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Roderick. Mr. Polster, anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, Chairperson, perhaps just to add to my colleagues. So, I mean, we are very mindful when we work with municipalities about our constitutional mandate, and that is to support and build the capacity of municipalities to perform their own functions and fulfill their own roles and responsibilities. But in the meanwhile, I think having obviously oversight and monitor the municipalities in terms of their own performance, but we are very mindful of that. So, I mean, you've spoken about a number of things, and I think part of the challenges in relation to infrastructure development is around the resources, in other words, finances, also the capability, I think, and you spoke about the skills. And there's a number of other issues that municipalities in general have challenges with. So when we were approached by the French government in relation to this, and they've seen us a couple of times, and one of the contributing reasons, I think, why they chose the Western Cape was the level of governance in certain municipalities, and also looking at some of the performance over the last while. And part of the idea why there was a focus first on the secondary cities, the idea was in terms of the subsequent financing arrangements to look at perhaps also to register a bond on the market, and then ask these big towns and municipalities to collaborate to register a single bond and put that out on the market and so on. And just given the financial sustainability in some of those bigger municipalities. So that was one of the contributing factors. And we had a technical man-made tech just 2 weeks ago, and I mean, municipalities have raised concerns around just the infrastructure development, but particularly also around Eskom. Eskom in the Western Cape has taken a decision that they would no longer replace the street lighting in the Eskom areas. So we were asked to pick up that with Eskom. This is a decision that they made. And that responsibility now falls on municipalities to ensure that they actually replace the street lighting in Eskom areas where Eskom is actually responsible for the street lighting. Obviously, it raises all concerns around the safety of citizens within those areas. So that is part of the thing. What we've done also additionally, given the fact that there's concerns around the sustainability of municipalities, we have collaborated with Hans Seidel and the University of Stellenbosch to look at in-depth research around the financial sustainability of municipalities. And perhaps if you allow at some time in the future, Honourable Chairperson, we can also make that presentation of the relevant findings and how also COVID-19 has impacted on the financial sustainability of municipalities. Maris has reflected on the smaller municipalities, and what we also do, particularly to assist the smaller municipalities, we have assist them with developing and putting together what we call the infrastructure master plans, so that we know what the impact and what the pressure is on the infrastructure, what is the lifespan, and also what is the looking into the future, what are the requirements in terms of the growth. And I think there's honourable members that made reference to the growth potential study of various towns in the province, and we do take that into account. The last point that I want to raise, you've raised a question around skills and capability. And so this I haven't discussed with anybody, and it's the first time that I raise it now. I haven't discussed it with the minister, and it's something that I am going to investigate in the province. What we want to do is, what I suggest we do is, I intend to make a bursary available to potential candidates that want to study engineering, maybe a 3 or 4 a year bursary for those candidates. And so when they do qualify as either candidate engineers or professional engineers, actually have some kind of commitment where they are deployed to municipalities and help municipalities with infrastructure development and so on. I think the skill is diminishing in municipalities in relation to infrastructure or to engineers. I mean, we struggle ourselves within the department that we don't get people coming through the system. And so the idea about a sort of a internship and a bursary mechanism to allow pupils that actually finish matric and so on, maybe to finance by means of a bursary a engineering qualification, and obviously with related commitments, but that they on conclusion of the studies, they can actually work in a province for a couple of years, or otherwise be deployed for municipalities, just to help municipalities with further infrastructure development, particularly around the skills and so on, that we have people coming through the pipeline and so on. So that is the vision on how we want to assist municipalities, and I think we will work with that to make that most probably possible in the next year or so. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Members, are there any follow-up questions you'd like to ask? Going once. Honourable Moran, I recognise you.
Chair, thanks. Not necessarily a follow-up question, but the response from Mr. Bart in terms of your outskirt areas and whether they will be included in this particular program, and his response was basically to turn around, to focus on those areas that may turn around the economy and also to assist with the financial streams of the municipality. Now, to some of us, your township economy is equally important, Chair. And as I've said, the infrastructure and especially roads is equally important, because some of those big trucks don't want to go into those areas because of the gravel roads. So when we speak about infrastructure and see whether we can turn around those municipalities, it seems it doesn't speak township, your township economy. It's just the sense that I'm getting from the response of those who have responded. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Moran. Honourable van der Westhuizen, recognise you.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for the slight delay. I sometimes struggle to unmute. Chair, can I just ask, on that slide where the different projects were presented to us to the value of 1.22, what I presume would be billion, can I just ask, why were towns such as Drakenstein and Stellenbosch, who I believe have been identified in the past as really some of these high growth areas for this urbanization that we are seeing, why are they not included in those plans? Did I miss that, if that was dealt with? And then secondly, Chair, these are really exciting facts that have been shared with us, but to what extent, can we, what is the next step and what is the timeline? We as politicians always like to share good news with voters, yet I'm also extremely careful not to create false expectations from people. And perhaps if we could just get a little bit more clarity on the status in that regard, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Mr. Bolter?
Chairperson, I just asked Marius to respond on the last two items. I can also respond on the matter that Honourable Member Marin actually raised around the roads. Thank you. Marius?
HOD and Chair. Yes, in terms of the Drakenstein and Stellenbosch example, they are part of the program. We've had engagements with them. They are just at this point in time not ready. And as far as like the other municipalities that could give to us projects that has been developed as to a feasibility level. So in order for us to take projects into the program, you've got to have projects that's already at feasibility level. But there is no way that we will not be working with Drakenstein and Stellenbosch. They would most certainly be our priority in phase 2, where we will gradually bring them on board and also take their projects for blended financing.
Thank you, Marius. Mr. Bolter?
Chairperson, just on the road, so we are quite aware of just the requirements of roads by municipalities. So for this reason, I have pulled in the Department of Transport or Public Works in relation to assistance for Theewaterskloof, as well as George at this point in time. So, we've got municipal roads and we've got provincial proclaimed roads and so on. So municipalities are increasingly asking us to assist us with municipal roads. We are navigating our way around it, given the governance requirements and so on. Obviously, a view that we can't spend funding on stuff that's not that's in private or so. So we had a couple of conversations with the head of Department of Transport and Public Works and the CFO to see how do we assist municipalities in relation to the maintenance of roads, but also upgrading the roads within the province. And I must say that the Department of Transport and Public Works are coming on board with initiatives to support and assist municipalities. On the other hand, we are also quite aware of the concerns that particular farmers are raising with us, the extent of the gravel roads. The argument is that when their produce gets to the market, it's so bruised that it's just good enough for juice. So, and we're also working with the department to see what we can do, particularly the gravel roads, how regularly it can be scraped, or whether it can actually be sort of chipped and sprayed. And those are the initiatives that we're working with the Department of Transport and Public Works to see. They were fundamentally just responsible for provincial proclaimed roads and if necessary national roads with the assistance of the national department. But we are now sort of intervening in terms of giving support to municipalities in terms of municipal proclaimed roads in this regard, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bolsa. In conclusion, colleagues, we all recognize that there's over the years, there's been a huge influx of people into the Western Cape and to other provinces as well, Gauteng in particular. And we have also noticed how infrastructure in many other provinces are collapsing because of a host of reasons. And I think what we've heard today is a proactive and welcoming move by the department with its partners to prevent infrastructure decay in our province. And I think it is of great comfort to me when Marius was mentioning that the program is modeled in a all costs paradigm, in the sense that it spans over the life of the investment. And I think that will address the concerns of sustainability and infrastructure maintenance over the long term, and also the financial sort of sustainability of the particular project. And from my side, Mr. Pauls and your team, I want to thank you for all the work and the initiative that you have displayed in conceptualizing this particular program. It's proactive and it will benefit our province greatly in the long term. It may not happen overnight, but certainly the foundations are being laid for the medium term and long term. And then lastly, also quite particularly excited about you sharing with us your intention of making scholarships available to potential engineering students who could be of assistance to our municipalities and to your department in the future upon graduating. And for that, Mr. Paulser, on behalf of the committee, want to wish you well and your colleagues, that we will have in future regular updates in terms of the rollout of the program and what challenges you may experience and in what way we can assist you in smoothing out those sort of obstacles and challenges that you may encounter along the way. Thank you so much, sir, and your team. You are welcome to leave the meeting now, and then the committee will then proceed with its administrative responsibilities. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, members. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay. Right, colleagues, Johan.
Yes, Chairperson.
Right, let's proceed with the agenda items, and I think there are minutes and reports that we need to consider. Will you just fly those, please?
We'll start with the minutes, Chairperson, of 4 May.
Okay.
There we go, Chairperson.
Colleagues, here's page 1. Just can you enlarge it a little more, Johan?
There we go.
Yeah. Can you spell that? Right. Okay. To check your attendance, members. Thank you. Can you move on? Members, these minutes were circulated to the committee. There's the resolution, and that's it. That's the end of the minutes. Any changes that you'd like to be affected? I see Honorable Maseko.
Chair, move that we adopt.
Honorable van der Westhuizen is a.
I support that motion.
Thank you, colleagues. Minutes adopted. Johan.
Chairperson, I'll get the next one. Minutes of 5 May.
Okay. Okay, we move on. Page 1, colleagues. Can you proceed? Okay. It was a very short meeting, colleagues. Any movement, shaker, any changes that you'd like to effect? Honorable van der Westhuizen.
I propose that we adopt the minutes.
Honorable Maseko, thank you.
Chair, I support the move.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Thank you. Minutes of the 5th of May adopted. Johan.
Chairperson, the next one is the minutes of 21 May. That was with the Independent Electoral Commission and Home Affairs. And it was a meeting that was attended by the Committee on Premier and all other members.
Thank you. Right, it's page 1. Any additions or changes? On to page 2. Any additional changes? Page 3. Page 4. Any changes you'd like to be effected, colleagues? Or if not, can I have a proposal that we adopt the minutes of 21st? Honorable Maseko?
Chair, I just wanted to check. The document is gone. My apology if it was recorded there.
It was, Chairperson.
Yeah, yes, Honorable Maseko, it was recorded.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I see Honorable van der Westhuizen.
I propose that we adopt the minutes.
There's a proposal that we adopt. We have a seconder.
Chair, I think we may have a problem. I think you were the only other person that was also in that meeting that is currently online.
Okay, so we don't require a seconder for the minutes to be adopted, correct?
Correct, Chairperson.
Right. So
you may second, but you're right.
Thank you. So the minutes are adopted. Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. Johan, the next piece of.
Chairperson, we have the.
I think that's the report that we have.
It's the quarterly report.
Yeah, quarterly report. Yeah. Right. This quarterly report was also circulated to members. Page 1, any additions or corrections? Page 2, to check your attendance, colleagues. Those were the resolutions and the status of the implementation thereof. What we have on screen are your attendance to check whether those are correct. If there's any changes that to be affected, we could do so. None. Anyway, and then we have the legislation that we processed. Oversight visit to Genadendal, and the resolutions, and there were no cluster visits, no international study, and nothing of the sort. And then lastly, the budget expenditure to date. Jan, can you just give us context to that expenditure to date, please?
Chairperson, yes, this is the fourth quarterly report for the fourth quarter. So that was our
last year.
The last year. So I think we have spent, we had a balance of 6,100 Rand left.
Okay.
As you know, the new budget is a little bit different.
That's correct, yeah. Any questions, colleagues, with regard to the report, Honourable van der Westhuizen? I notice your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just draw your attention to the table of members' attendance? It's 7. I think it's page 5 or 6 of the 11-page document. There, on the 12th of February, we've got Honourable Maseku marked as both present and with apology. Perhaps Mr. Kutsi could just either correct that or just explain to us, because unfortunately my records are not at hand.
Okay.
Chairperson, I'll correct this. I'll just have to go back to the minutes, then I'll correct it.
Okay, fine. Good. Thank you. I hope it satisfies you, Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Yes, Chair, and with that possible correction, I would like to move that we adopt the quarterly report.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Is there a seconder? Our report adopted.
I second that, Chair. I second that.
Thank you, Honourable Maseku. Thank you so much. Anything else, Jan? I think there's just one more thing. The program.
Chairperson, no, it's first the annual activities report. This is just a summary of the whole year of the 4 quarters that we have concluded.
Okay. And any additions or corrections on page 2 or page 1? Can move on, Jan. Page 3, any additions or corrections? We've concluded amendments to the structures bill during that quarter. And that's the last page. Any corrections or that you'd like to be affected? If none, can I have a proposal to accept the activity report? Honourable Maseku, thank you. Seconded by Honourable van der Westhuizen. Thank you.
Correct.
Adopted. Johan, lastly, it's the...
Chairperson, then it's just a committee program. As indicated to you earlier on, we will be going into a sort of an extended constituency period. So our next meeting date will be on the 27th of July. And perhaps the two of us can sit and then just to program the items for discussions during those meetings.
Thank you. And with your acquiescence, members, Is it all in order for you that Johan and I determine what the next meeting agenda is after the constituency period? Maseko?
Chairperson, we entrust you all the time with that, you and Johan. But I wanted to find out something.
Yeah, for sure.
I talked to Shamis about the oversight which I was proposing between me and Shamis to have the joint oversight between local government and the human settlements, and that being said, I think it was based on some issues. They are so intertwined that it's better if these two standing committees, especially when coming to the special planning and the infrastructure, that if we go for an oversight and have both, then it will be beneficial to us. Also, maybe I suspect to the municipalities in how can they go about in dealing with some of the issues within the municipalities, and for us to have an understanding of all those challenges that are coming with both portfolios that they cannot deal with.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Honorable van der Westhuizen, I recognize you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to support that we leave it to you and the procedural officer. I do know that this morning in programming there were some small changes to the program going forward, including constituency periods, and therefore I think it would be best if we, as Honorable Maseko proposed, leave the finalization of the program to you, and that we just take note of what is currently being planned.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Certainly, I think it is a meaningful suggestion that we should collaborate with regard to these oversight visits, and often the one feeds into the other, and then we can support each other in that regard. Thank you. So thank you, colleagues. And then lastly, colleagues, is that any particular resolutions that we'd like to adopt in relation to today's presentation? Honorable Maseko, Honorable van der Westhuizen, I recognize in that order.
Chair, it's per se not that a resolution, or it's a resolution, you'll advise accordingly. I think I would appreciate if we can get the update of the progress as the department, they implement the programs that they have on the infrastructure. Just because we, as you see the program, the interaction in the elections are going to be there. It's not going to be that much. But if we get the written progress of what they are doing, it will be appreciated very much so.
Okay. Do you want it in terms of a presentation to the committee, or do you want it in writing?
Just in writing, maybe if we can have a standard of maybe they write to us after 3 months basis, the quarterly basis, something to that effect. And then if maybe there can be something that we see as we read it, then that we can propose that we have them on a agenda to come and address us on the issue that we see that it's of interest to us.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Honorable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. I want to concur with what Honorable Maseko has stated. I think if we could first get a written report on the developments, so that I support that proposed resolution. The second one is, Chair, I also think that this is we should express our gratitude to the officials for this initiative and encourage them to look for even more international funding. I think we are finding ourselves in a time where many of our local governments are struggling, and there's financial situation have been adversely affected by COVID and the shutdown of offices last year, etc. The number of people that are enduring financial hardship, and that initiatives such as this should be applauded, but we should also encourage them to look for even more such funding. I do believe that in terms of, you know, the particularly care for the environment, that, you know, there are more and more international funding that have been made available, promises that have been made to assist us in cleaning up the environment and therefore be more energy efficient, etc. So I think in short, if we could thank them for this initiative, encourage them to proceed with this, and thirdly, to look for even more alternate sources of funding. And then lastly, Chair, I think they've also said that they are looking at a completely new model of funding or supporting our local governments, and that we should actually have a complete new look at our municipal finances. And I think that's also something which we should ask them to take home and to really work on such alternate models, which hopefully in the future this province would be able to submit to national government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Johan, I see you flashing your mic. You want to express yourself?
No, sorry, Chair. I think the table was shaking as I was writing. I will draft it, Chair, and then have it ready for you to just peruse.
Thank you, Johan. And so, furthermore, colleagues, I think in terms of the financial sustainability collaboration model between the department and the Hans Heidel and University of Stellenbosch collaboration is concerned, I think that we should, at the earliest possible opportunity in our new term, have a presentation on the findings and the reports surrounding that sort of collaboration. But that's it, colleagues. Anything else you'd like to mention? If not, I'd like...
Chairperson, just briefly, two things. We didn't look at the tracking document. Can I just bring that up quickly? We can adopt that. And then the second thing is, it was a resolution some time ago that we get copies of the community education program of the Department of Local Government. I've received memory sticks with the Afrikaans, English and isiXhosa versions of this education program. But now with members not being in the office on a regular basis, I don't want to go and leave it anywhere. So it's with me in the office. If members are perhaps in the office, I'm in the office on Mondays and Wednesdays, then I can just give it to them.
Johan, can I, in that regard, could I ask you to just give it to our secretaries on the various sort of floors, and then they can put it in the offices. So whenever members go to the office, and it will be there.
All right, I'll do that for you, Chair. I'll just bring up the other document.
Okay. Okay, right. Tracking document as at 13th of October.
Yeah.
That's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Can you just speak to it quickly on that because I mean it's so faint and I can't.
Yeah,
anything that's significantly
there's nothing outstanding. We have all the information that was requested from the department we have received and was disseminated to and distributed to the members. Yes.
Okay.
At the moment, hard copies are a bit difficult to distribute, but I have provided members with electronic versions of all these documents.
Good. Thank you so much. Right, colleagues. With that, can I have a mover that we adopt the tracking document as presented and distributed to members?
Chair, I move that we adopt.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko, seconded by Honourable van der Westhuizen. And that, colleagues, the last formal piece of documentation that we needed to adopt. Allow me the opportunity to thank Siraj for his availability and assistance, and Johan Vermeulen for your presence, and most importantly, Johan Kutse and our members for your input and presence in this meeting. It's highly appreciated. This is our last meeting before we go on constituency. May you be safe, and may the gods be with you today and every other day. I thank you.
You're very kind, Chair. Thank you.